Hello, everybody. We're live. We've
Well,
got me and Michael here for the moment. Jay might be on his way, but whether he is or not, he's with us in spirit, and we'll just continue on ourselves.
we'll hold it
This
down for the next hour.
Yeah, this week it's auction bidding, and we might have some extra time for other things because I can't think of very many games I've played with this, and even the
It's
ones that I've played I don't really like that much. So we'll see how this conversation goes.
yeah, I have one that I've really enjoyed, and so I can walk us through that in some detail and either show some pictures of it or let you show that on BGG. But it's
Okay.
not a mechanic that I play with a whole lot either, and I kind of want to unpack why. If I understand
Mhm.
right, it's not your favorite mechanic either. Is that true?
No, I don't think I like it very much.
And we
Um,
should,
yeah,
and
and I
we
don't
should
like gambling very much either. So
There could be a tie in there. That's definitely possible. Um, Also, if we get a couple people in the chat live at Twitch later, and uh, we can ask them if there is anyone that does like the genre, what do they enjoy about it? What
mhm.
makes it fun? Because clearly it is a thing that some people like. There's enough games that use it as a mechanic that I think it has a fan base, and it always interests me how different things appeal to different people in games, and why some people hate a genre while other people will play exclusively that genre. I see
Right.
that a lot in video games too. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think it's true just across play in general. I think certain types of play are really fun for people, and that same thing can be really frustrating for someone else.
Right. Yeah, I'm a very risk averse person. I don't like
Mhm.
uncertainty. And you could say like in general luck should be awful for me, but I
Mhm.
I like it sometimes. Sometimes I see the value in it, especially because it makes it more approachable for new players. That's probably my favorite thing about luck in a
Yeah.
game. Um I like it when it's a mix. I don't like it when it's only luck. Then it just feels like it's happening to me, and I didn't even need to be sitting at the table. It was pointless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Oh,
if there's a mix of the two, I'm usually good with that.
yeah. Man, finding that balance is important. One of the first design lessons I stumbled into in the first few months of my time as like a intentional game designer was the difference between creating a game that happened to the players and creating a game that the players could interact with, because you can throw all the randomness and luck into a game and make it just spit out things
Right.
on its own
Outcomes.
interactivity,
Yeah.
but if you don't have any choice as a player, if it's just luck, that feels really bad, and that sounds really obvious to say, but
Right.
despite having learned that lesson, I've had to relearn it in almost every game that I've made, where I'm like, oh no, I did the thing again, where I tried to simulate an experience completely random driven in the background, and now the game is just happening to someone.
Mhm.
And that's not fun. So, so what are your thoughts about bidding games in general? Or I guess, what are we talking about when we say that? We're talking about games that where where players are choosing the value of something, or they're trying to outbid something, where people are trying to get something, acquire something, and the person that's willing to pay the most gets it. What I think I'm giving a
Mhm.
pretty loose explanation. How would you define this?
Yeah. And it's also on BGG specifically. It's listed as auction slash bidding.
Okay.
So those, I don't know that those two words really have the exact same meaning, but like you in auctions you bid,
So
right?
it's a
Like
pay what you want mechanic in a game, where instead of this card or this house costing exactly this material or
yeah,
this
yeah.
currency, it is the cost of something
Hmm.
is based on how much everyone is willing to pay for it, right?
Right,
That's the
yeah. It's
central thing that
contested.
defines it.
You're
I
you're
think that.
trying to get a deal.
Mhm,
You're trying to want something. You're trying to figure out what other people don't want, I guess,
mhm,
more.
mhm. I think that game design mechanic as like a secondary mechanic, we'll get into the games that are focused on that in a second. But as a secondary mechanic, as like just kind of a nudge to your game, I think that's actually really, really interesting. And a lot of players might be familiar with it without realizing it, because
Mhm.
very common, very common popular games use this in things like Puerto Rico or Agricola. It's Agricola or Agricola? I think it's Agricola.
Yeah, I hear Agricola the most.
I think it's Agricola.
Yeah.
So Puerto Rico, for example, a lot of people have played that game by Alea from Ravensburger, where there's a card that you can choose for. There's a couple different, like, I think, abilities or like player roles you can choose each round, and players can choose whichever one they want. You get to pick first if it's your turn first, but the ones that don't get picked, because there's always a few extra left over, get some extra currency put on them for the next round.
Oh, okay.
Which means that those cards get more valuable over time, and that in itself has its own name. There's a mechanic name for that, where unchosen options become more valuable later. Caverna does this. I've played at least half a dozen games that do this, where the things that no one wants, their value goes up over time, so that eventually everything gets chosen.
Yeah.
But there's like an underlying mechanic there where you're saying, how valuable is this thing? Well, it depends on the players. The players are bidding in a way by choosing where to pick their actions. And it's not strictly bidding, but it's that same mechanic where the value of stuff is based on how everyone else values it. And the things that are valued less actually go up in value over time. So I think as a general rule, I think letting players decide the value of actions or options or cards is a really, really good thing. But what happens when that's the central mechanic of the game, which is what we're talking about now?
And really specifically, too, when it's auction bidding, you're spending game currency on it. What you're talking about, you're using a different, it's a kind of currency, but generally it's, I would say, current game currency points and action points are different things in games, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And so with auction bidding, you're using your actual currency. You're losing currency. You're giving up your currency in the game to get something.
So do we want to talk about an example or two to give some context around what this looks like in gameplay?
Why don't you tell us about Panic on Wall Street, which is the one that you know and you think is fun.
Yeah.
First.
All right. So Panic on Wall Street, as you're showing here on the screen, it is a couple things that are interesting about this game. It's a real-time game, which is another mechanic that divides a lot of players, in and out. But it combines the actual bidding, auctioning mechanic of a real-life auction and the chaos of an actual real-life auction, and it simulates a real-life auction. So the loop of, or I guess the breakdown of this game is it splits players into two roles, and I forget the names of the roles, but you're either playing basically a bank and you're funding things that you think are successful, or you're a seller and you are buying products on the down rounds between each round, and then trying to pitch those to everyone else. And so based on your role during the real-time portion of the game, when everyone's playing all at once, you are either looking at everyone else's boards. You see these different colored rectangles here. These are types of commodities, essentially. There's a market, which is shown there in the middle, and there's some randomness on the market saying the current value of each of those four color rectangles. And what will happen is at the end of the bidding, those four dice in the center will be rolled, and there will be a new value for the red, yellow, blue, and green rectangles, the products. And so everyone has a sense of what everything is probably worth, but no one knows exactly how much the blue, yellow, green, and red things are worth. If you're a seller, you have these rectangles and you're trying to literally sell them to the highest bidder. So people have tokens with their player marker on it, like a cow or an apple or whatever, something that says, it's me, I'm this player. And and you're trying to get people to buy your products. And the people.
So is each player, like I am the agriculture player? Is that what you're saying is happening here?
Not exactly.
Or blue is agriculture, or something like that.
The one that I played with, the tokens are marked differently. It's just basically different like money symbols. So you're like the dollar
Okay.
symbol player or the penny
Okay.
symbol player, but those are irrelevant. You
Okay.
are, they'll say that I'm seller A and you are buyer A. I am trying to get all the other, what did I say? I'll say I'm the seller and you're the buyer. I'm trying to get all of the other buyers to buy my yellow, blue, green, and red products, which are the rectangles. And you
Okay.
are telling me what you'll pay for them. So you might say, Michael, will you sell me your blue thing for 15? And I know that right now it's worth about 20. Could go up, could go down. There's a little bit of randomness there. I can
Mhm.
say, yes, it's yours, sold, write 15 with a right erase
Okay.
marker onto the card, and you put your token on it. That means it is
Okay. Okay.
yours at the end of the round. There's a timer going on, like a sand timer, and you're trying to get all of your tokens on as many things as possible to have bought as many things as possible. The catch, if this is the only main catch, is that everyone else is also trying to either sell or buy things, and they can knock you off with a higher bid. So someone can come behind you and say, oh,
Mhm.
Heather gave you 15 for that blue, erase hers, give her token back, I'll give you 20. And I can agree to that person in real time, erase the 15,
Okay.
write down 20, give you your token back, take their token, now it's theirs. And the game continues in this utter chaos for about 60 seconds. And then after 60 seconds, the timer's up and everything freezes. And you look at the game state. As a seller, I want to have sold as many of my products as possible because I'll get in-game currency for everything sold at the price I sold it at. And as a buyer, you want to have bought as many things as you can for a good price, because you can then take it and basically sell. You earn money for what you bought it at minus the current
Mm.
cost of that good. So you're like the reseller. You're trying to earn a net profit by buying a little bit below the market price. And so there's some mental strategy, there's some probability understanding, there's some good market sense, but all of that devolves into loud politics and unethical bargaining during the window of the real game. And I think that's why this game is so fun to me, because it goes in two phases, where one phase is careful, thoughtful strategy, and you're internally thinking, okay, what is the probable value of all four types of resources and how much am I willing to buy or sell those for? I'm going to make these carefully laid plans. And then the timer starts and everything goes out the window, and someone is screaming about how they'll give you, they'll buy you ice cream next Tuesday if you trade with them. You have to promise to not trade with this person. And someone else is like, no, listen to me.
Mhm.
And it's madness. And it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah.
But it creates a game experience unlike almost anything I've ever played.
It
And so,
reminds me of Pit, way more complicated. I
yep,
haven't played Pit. I've played a prototype that somebody said was a lot like Pit. So
I
that's
own
what I'm
Pit, and
saying.
it definitely it is it is connected to Pit in theme and in feel, but a lot more complicated systems.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
very much the same concept of Pit, which is loud yelling and trying to make these agreements with people. It just puts a lot more board game behind it, while Pit is basically glorified Go Fish, but with a lot of
Okay.
yelling. This is a real honest to goodness board game that people of all skill levels will enjoy, but still with all the yelling. So
Right.
yeah, and this fits as a auction game because you're literally trying to sell off or buy things, and the value is completely based on what everyone around you thinks and how good you are at selling something, which is really fun. Like
Mhm,
the
mhm.
the true numerical statistical value of a yellow rectangle might be 30 this round, but if you're a really bad salesman, you might get people giving you 10, and that's it, unless you can convince them otherwise. So I don't know. It challenges a lot of game strengths that I don't usually get challenged in games that I play. So
Mhm.
it kind of pushes some new buttons, or um, it's a big break from the kind of stuff I like in games. I don't think I could play it 100 times in a row, but it's always a good palate cleanser for the kind of games we play. Hey, Zell.
Sell? That makes it a lot easier to pronounce. I like your
Good to see you. Welcome back.
Yeah.
It's a hoot, and I would recommend that everyone go get it or try it. But it's also out of print, which makes it a very hard game to get your hands on.
It sounds like it's a really like specific flavor that not a lot of people are going to like. So it sort of makes sense that it's out of print. To be honest with you, it looks like it's about 11 years
you
old.
also saw it's got 7 on BGG, which is a very respectable score for such a polarizing game.
Yeah. So the people who, you either love it or hate it, kind of thing. If you
I haven't
are
looked,
the
but
type of person who likes
I bet
it,
it's
you're
9-star and 2-star reviews. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's one example, and a game that I find to be a lot of fun for a lot of different reasons. So that fits, right? That's definitely
Oh
a
yeah,
bidding.
I think that's a very it's very different, like you're saying, than other auction games. Usually the auction is kind of turn-based. In all of the examples I can think of, and I'm probably going to struggle a little bit to talk about these games because they kind of fall immediately out of my mind. I think to myself, meh.
Right.
I don't think about them much more. Even though I've played a few of them, I only own one of them. So we could talk first about this one that I own, which is The Thanks. And I just barely still own it. Honestly, I look at it sometimes on my shelf and I'm like, do I really want it? It's so cheap. Like, it takes up so little space.
It's barely worth the 2 by 3 inches space it takes up.
Which is harsh. It's a really well-known game, I guess. I don't know if popular is the right word, but it's a standby, and it's one of those numbers on cards games that is quick and easy to teach. That's probably the biggest reason I keep it. And I also kind of feel like there might be something I don't get about it, or everybody at the table has to be in the same mindset, in the right magic circle for it to work out. You have to maybe balance each other. If one person is allowed to continually buy good things for them for cheap, they might not even have to try. They'll just win. I've had that happen once when I taught it to people, and using it for this whole like introducing new people to games thing might not be a great idea in that context, because what if they don't get game strategy and they just sort of it could be maybe easy for them to break it by just being sort of dopey about their bids. But the way it works, actually, the one that I have is I bought it used and it's all sleeved and stuff, so it looks like it's very special to me, but it just came like this.
So tell me about how it works, like, because you said it's well known, and I'm sure it is. There are so many well-known games I've never touched. Sorry, I got a different computer. It's making noises. Let me mute it.
Okay.
I don't even think I've heard about this game, which shouldn't surprise me. I've got so much to learn. So how does it work?
This one comes up a lot on the Dice Tower because Tom Vassell, I think I actually can't even pick up on what it is, but there's an inside joke with the way that he plays this game, or he has a strategy that he's trying to make work and he believes will work someday, but never does. But they always kind of just talk about it. It comes up, and I'm never feeling like I'm in on the joke. But you want to get the lowest number of points in this game. And gosh, I actually, like I said, the details fall out of my brain. Let me look at the rule book real quick to even remind myself what the deal is. You're trying to get runs of the same numbers. It's good for you if the numbers are close together. So, example, at the end of the game, Lisa has 3 single cards and 2 sequences in front of her. Together, they get her to 59 points. 3 plus 7 plus 10 plus 14 plus 25. Those are those numbers are the numbers that are the lowest number in the sequence. So, like, if you have a 8 and you can add a 7 to it, now it's worth 7. That pile is worth 7 points instead of 8 points. But they have to be in exact sequence. And then you also start with a certain number of these red chips. And these are the bidding. These are the currency or whatever. You're supposed to keep it very secret how many you have. And you sometimes, so the thing about this game is sometimes you really want a card, you really want a card because of what's sitting in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you really don't want a card. Especially like high numbered cards are like, oh, I don't want to take that 24. You know what I mean? That's worth more points, especially if I don't have any numbers around it. But once I've got a 25, 24 is golden. Or if I have a 26, boy, I need both. I need to also get the 25 along with that 24. So maybe I want the 24. Maybe I'll take it. But you pay to not take it. I think that's why when I was asking you before, is this a bidding auction game? BGG does say it is. Basically, if it's to you, if it's your turn, you have to take the card or pay a chip to say no thanks.
Okay. So you're in that case, you're paying basically for the option to turn something down. It's not buying a resource. You're not bidding for a thing that everyone's saying going once, going twice. It's you're paying for the choice to take an action or to deny an action.
And you get the chips when you do say, okay, I accept that. When it comes around to your turn, it's going around the table. You get the chips, everybody, before you paid to avoid having it.
Okay.
So, I mean, it is an interesting concept. In practice, a lot of times when I've played it, it just feels like we're not in the magic circle. Everyone's sort of blasé about it. Like, it's quite common for me to play it. I feel like I haven't taught it right, or I haven't explained the strategy right, or something like that. Maybe we could call it a reverse auction game.
Yeah. Maybe that's a better name for it, because you're trying to get rid of, or you're not getting rid of something. Now I'm thinking about what a reverse auction is. Oh my gosh, I just realized that in the game I was just talking about, now I'm going to draw a blank on the game. The auctioning game that I led with. It's one of the phases.
Panic on Wall Street.
Yeah, thank you, Panic. There's one of the phases in the game is literally an auction. So between the crazy trying to shout over everyone, the way that the players that are selling the resources, the way that they acquire those in between rounds is a literal auction, where a player will take the role of the banker and they will draw from a stack a new green one. And they'll say, I got a green here. Who will give me 10 for the green? 10 going once, 15, 15 going right here, 25, 25, 25. And they'll fill it off to those players that way. And again, you're making that decision of, okay, currently greens on the board are worth 30. There's 3 rounds left in the game. I think over the span of the game, I can probably get 50 back. So I'm willing to go up to 50. So you're literally doing that auction thing where you're thinking, what is this worth? How much can I get back for it? What is my cap? Can I push other people over their cap? And you're doing it again all in real time.
And you're paying attention to the vibe, basically, whether other people want it.
You talked about the magic circle. And I think something that Panic does really well is that it gets everyone at the table involved and invested in the auction. I think the success of that for the players playing it is tied in part to how much everyone cares. Like, what good is an auction if there's apathy at the table? It's really, really dull. And so for a game to work well, whether you're designing a game with this mechanic or playing it with friends, you need a group of people where there's engagement and interest and investment. We can talk about that both from like how do you play a game like this well, how do you make it fun, and also from a design perspective, which is how do you create engagement and interest and buy-in in players, and how do you not lose that by letting players snowball away with the lead or feel like they're left out. Seems like a tricky build.
Auctions themselves actually are a game.
Yeah.
A gamified way of buying things in real life.
That's a really good point. It's not a very practical way to buy things. Sometimes you'll get a deal, but most people go because it's fun to auction, not because it's the most price-effective, time-effective way to acquire new goods.
And I would say, until pretty recently in my life, I had occasionally been a part of silent auctions as someone who put, donated a thing into it.
Yeah,
basically. So that was maybe the only auction I really engaged with. But then in the last 4 or 5 years of my life, when I started to go to local conventions here in Colorado, there's somebody here in Colorado who's a really good board game auctioneer. So different conventions get this same guy to come to run the board game auction, and I was sort of standoffish, like, I don't know, people talk about it, I'll just see. And I actually love them now. So I say I don't really like auction bidding games, but I do like this game, the game of going to the board game auction at conventions.
You
And
like
this guy,
game bidding auctions.
yeah, is
It's
really
not
good. And
auction
I like
bidding
putting
games.
my games in the auction because he's good at
Ah,
selling them.
ah,
So it's sort of I can kind of come out ahead. I can come home with, $16 and 5 new games.
yeah,
If I give him something good to say, I have to fill out a little slip. I say some selling points of the game, like, this is a family game, blah blah blah, like, the good points about it, even though I don't like it and I don't want it anymore. Everybody knows that's the case if it's in the auction. Whoever
yeah.
owns that game doesn't want it anymore. But but this might be good for this kind of person or that kind of person. I'll make sure to give him something to work with. And then he's very good at being sort of a comedian about it. He'll there's a game that was about divorce, and he's like, oh boy, you know what I mean? He does kind of the stand-up comedian thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he encourages people, are you sure? Nobody. And yeah, and you can also kind of jump in on those that are like, nobody's bidding on this. Oh, okay, I'll have it.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually got my copy of Mall Madness, which is a vintage, could be very expensive game, totally out of print, because
Uh-huh.
the person had said, not guaranteed to have all parts. And I was like, well, that's better than nothing. And I got it for $11 and it totally worked. So
Wow.
I did get a deal. But yeah, so that's a game that I played, that's auction and bidding. And my friend Amanda, who does the Protospiel Tested with us,
Yeah.
in the evenings, she came right before the pandemic happened. She came to the last local convention we had that was non-pandemic affected, and I completely hooked her into the same behavior. She came home with a huge pile of games.
It sounds like a lot of fun, and it immediately sounds like something that I'd want to try and recreate in a game, like something people could take home and play, because like you said, it already is one. And so
but it
I
depends
guess,
on the auctioneer.
well,
It's a skill, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that a type of auction game, I think Panic is kind of like this, and there probably are games like this that we just aren't aware of that could be fun for players, is one that lets you take on that role, not for the sake of role playing, but it's a game that lets you act. It's a game that lets you test that skill of how good can you be at convincing other people of something's worth or of understanding the market. And so I think that could be a lot of fun. I bet there are more games that do that than I realize, but Panic at Wall Street definitely does. It asks players to be good at quickly thinking on their feet, of convincing other people, maybe a little bit of hustling, and all in real time, which is, I think, a lot of things that are fun about tapping into a real auction, as well as being rewarded for knowing the stuff, for knowing the worth of something that someone else might not know, of caring about the individual items.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Knowing the worth when somebody else doesn't know it. Also,
Yeah.
that's a big thing, probably also with real life auctions.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about ways to translate that into a game. But I was looking at some of the different games in BGG's list, and the top two for the ranking are both games that I've played. One that I've played a ton. I talked about it on the show a couple weeks ago, and I didn't think of them as being tied to this mechanic. So the top ranked auction bidding game on BGG is Through the Ages, which is the game that I talked a ton about in our 3-player game.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't played that one, so it didn't come to mind for me.
Yeah, now that they mention it, I think I told you I played that game like 30 times. It does have that mechanic. It's so integrated with the rest of the systems that I don't even think about it. But it's close to the way that I described the mechanic actually in games like Puerto Rico, where it's how much is everyone willing to pay for it. But it is truly an auction. It's not something going up in value over time. It's, hey, here's a thing. You might get it for cheap if no one else really wants it. But if other people want it, how much are you willing to pay for this resource, for this military, for this ability to get more resources per turn? It's at its core, it's an engine building game, but it lets people decide how much is this piece of the engine worth to me.
Okay.
I would not. It's definitely not the central mechanic, at least not and thinking
It's
about
not a
it.
game about auction bidding.
No,
but
not at all. But
but
it's
the fact
important.
that auction bidding happens in it is important to how it works, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
and it's
Yeah.
a very well liked game. It's a very highly ranked game. It's currently ranked 12 on BGG, which is something. And there's a lot of games on there. So it's
Yeah.
a system that, despite all of our concerns here, can work really well. I think the trickier thing is making a game where it's a central mechanic. It seems like it's one of those mechanics that's more of a companion mechanic that can complement familiar systems really well.
Mhm.
And the other
The
one on
one
the oh, go ahead.
Oh, what is the other, what's the second place one?
I won't
It might
talk.
be the one I was about to say.
I won't speak to it much, but it's Power Grid, which is another game that
Oh.
I've played that a lot of people
Huh.
really like. I think Jason Slingowind really likes Power Grid. My brother-in-law is a big fan of it. It's well ranked on BGG. I've played it once or twice. It's a game and by Friedman Fries. That name rings a bell. Might just because I've played the game. But again,
Yeah,
it's not a game about auctions, but it is a game about what is this worth to you, and you have to decide that based on how much potential payoff that I think in this case you're trying to. Again, it's an engine building game, but you're trying to build ways to generate power and sell that. So it's another game that has a market as part of the game, and you're looking at potential payout for something based on how many turns are left in the game, based on the current state of the game. Is green energy really favorable right now? Is coal energy doing really well? And so you're making these live decisions of, okay, what is that worth? And as we said a second ago, if you're better than everyone else at assessing the value of that thing, you can bid better than other people and do well. I think that game is actually a little bit more about auctioning as a central mechanic than the Civilization game is. But both use it in a really interesting way, and I'd forgotten about this.
I have played Power Grid maybe 3 times, which is a lot for one game with how many games there are. But it's been maybe 3 years or more since I played it, so I'm having a hard time remembering what the auction is like. I remember you have the different types of power generators that you can acquire, but I don't remember bidding on them. I remember like just their price changing. I don't know.
I am looking to look at the rules now because I think I've played it twice, and like you said, it's been a few years. Maybe I can pick it up. But
I know it evolves, like new kinds of power come out. You know, there's green energy power, there's nuclear power, coal, etc. Different types, and then I feel like they have starting values or something on them too. But
there's an auction round in the game, like as one of the phases where, and I think it's if I remember right, it's the way that you acquire different power plants of different energy types. And so if I remember right, like a new coal plant will come out or a solar facility, and players all have an option to bid how much they want for it, and that it goes to the highest bidder. I might be making that up. I am positive.
Is it like turn-based too? Like, how much will you pay? Okay, how much will you pay? Or is it like a blind bid?
I don't remember. We should. This is where me doing the research on this game ahead of time would be useful. But I do know for sure there's an auction phase. So yeah, there we go. The mechanic can definitely be successfully implemented. But
and I do like that game. That one I've played, and I do like. I haven't tried Through the Ages, but a lot of things make me curious about it.
Yeah, Through the Ages is a good app experience if you want to play that game with people.
Way faster in the app?
Yes, it is a game that, it's a very good game, very well reviewed outside of the app, but it's a game with a lot of setup, a lot of cards, a big table space, and the app just automates the heck out of that game. And it makes it really easy to play. That's the reason I played it so many times, is because it's like a $10 app, which for apps is really expensive, and for board games is really cheap. You get a full $60 board game in that app, and if you have at least one other person to play it with,
Steam?
No, like literally a mobile app. They have it on iOS and Android. And
interesting.
It is one of the few board game mobile apps I own. It's created and published by the it is a authentic game. It's not like a
Pirated thing.
Yeah, it's not a pirated thing. It's not a simulated version. It is a fully scripted game where if you click on a card and say go here, it does the thing. It shuffles the cards. It's not a physics simulation of the game.
Right. Yeah, it's more like BGA.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but only for that game. The one thing you're saying about Panic on Wall Street is, you need to care about what's being sold, and all they are is a blue, a green. So it might be kind of difficult. It's just within the context of the game that you care, but games that actually have representations of things that you might want are the one that I think of is modern art.
Yeah.
And modern art is one we definitely should talk about because it's all about all the different ways you can do auctions.
Yeah. And just to Panic's credit, they aren't just colors. They're like fun, wacky, 1950s style time saver inventions. So like a toothpaste squeezer and things like that. But that isn't really what sells the auction. It comes down to just colors and the panic of the moment. So let's talk about modern art.
Yeah, it has been a while since I've only played this once, and it's been a while since I played this too. But the things that I remember about it are there's different artists, I believe, who's interesting. This is like this picture on BGG is making modern art, but making it about box art covers for board games. It's like a fan made one. That's a funny idea.
Yeah.
But let me see if I can find an example of the real. It looks like there's a lot of people who make their own modern art cards.
Yeah, and then post that on.
This one, this picture does not look like the copy that I played. Oh, fun. And yeah, your art galleries, trying to get these different pieces of art. And so like early, an artist, you're manipulating how popular an artist is by buying their stuff, I think. And you're bidding in different ways each time. There's like a past bid, a blind bid. I can't remember what they all are, and maybe I should. Maybe you can look at. Is there a quick list of what they are when you read the description of the game?
A list of the actions, a list of the
different kinds of bidding that you'll do, the different kind of auction that will happen.
Let me see.
Interesting.
Maybe here in the overview, because I do not know.
So yeah, if you're trying to think about wanting to make an auction or bidding game, this is probably a really important game to try out or play, or at least read the rule book for, because you'll see the subcategories of auction and bidding by looking into it.
Yeah, it has a lot of the different auction specific mechanics, like once around and sealed bids, turn order until pass. So it sounds like one of the more formative bidding games in the last couple decades. Which games like that are important to understand, both for what they created and their flaws and the ways that people have derived games from them. They shape a genre in an important way.
I know Raw is a really famous bidding game that a lot of people like. Again, this one I tried it out at my local board game store and felt like it fell really flat. I played it just Will and I, and we played it and thought that might have been a really different experience if we had 3 or 4 people, like back to the 3-player game question. Yeah. I think it's come up before. I can't remember which of our episodes it came up in, but I think it's a pretty simple game where you're just trying to get tile sets and you bid on them. Or that's all I remember about it, Egyptian themed game. And then For Sale is another really famous game. Have you played that one yet? It's also a very simple game, so it would be kind of like No Thanks, famous because it's relatively easy to teach new people, a good introductory game.
Okay.
And again, I don't remember a ton about it, but I know there's two phases where first you buy them and then you sell them.
This is the problem with having played so many games and then talked about and designed other games.
Well, and it's just, I think it's a consequence of me not really liking it very much, and so not trying to.
It wasn't memorable for you.
Remember it so that I could teach other people later, or thinking, oh, I want it. It would probably be, for example, it probably would be a pretty easy game for me to get at one of those auctions if I really wanted it. And maybe I should consider it if it's good to teach people new games, but it's easier to teach people games when you're excited to play it yourself, right?
You've got no shortage of good games to begin people
Absolutely.
with. I agree. Having a game you're passionate about is important for getting that buy-in, that interest from other people. On this topic, it made me realize that in the last 6 months or so, I've played 2 or 3 games about cryptocurrency and market manipulation. Cryptocurrency being the theme, but markets I played 3 games, maybe more, just very recently, about market manipulation. And I don't know if it's not quite the same mechanic, but there's a lot of overlap. By that, I just mean any game where how many points something is worth, or how valuable or how much something costs, depends on decisions that the rest of the players make. So,
to me, I think that's different than auction bidding. I think of that as an economic game. Like when I mentioned Raccoon Tycoon last week, I would think of that as economic or market manipulation game.
These terms get messy. It actually feels like a reverse auction a little bit. To Zell's point earlier, like you're trying to take something and make a category more or less valuable by the decisions you make. I've got Gift of Tulips recently. It was one of the games I picked up at Geekway. And that's another game that does that, where you're it is numbers on a card, but it's not just numbers on the card. There's actually really pretty flowers on the card, and the number that are blooming represent the number on the card. But it's about getting sets and types and then making the types and sets that you have more valuable than the other types and sets, instead of there being a static value assigned to a suit or a type of the game. It's like I can make decisions that make this type of tulip better at the flower festival at the end of the game, and so I want to do things that get me a certain type of card and then make that certain type of card more valuable. And I've seen that in a couple different games recently, and I think that's interesting. I think that in a lot of new games people are designing, I think players are reacting to current real world market events, and it drives them to an interest into how markets work. And so
that makes sense.
It's interesting to see topics and mechanics and genres and themes that spill out of people's real world experience. And when you get to playtest early prototype games, you see that real time. You see games that are a month old, and you're like, oh, I see where you're coming from with this. I see.
Right, I see.
Relevant today.
What made you think about this? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so since I think that's all the games I had to mention. I don't know if you have any others.
No, I think
maybe, and we don't have Jay, and so maybe I'll do a rare thing with you where I'll work with you to auction, so you don't have to do it all by yourself.
All right. So the categories here are auction and bidding, obviously. Nuclear energy. Oh, this is too easy. We're gonna make power grid.
Right. Maybe we can pick labyrinth instead of nuclear energy.
All right, labyrinth. Unless I have a new idea for nuclear energy. I actually work in the energy field professionally. I don't know if I've ever said that before, but I work for a power company, and I've been to nuclear plants. So maybe there's a game in there somewhere. That isn't Power Grid.
Oh my god.
So play a specific number of cards. That's a really interesting victory mechanic. And then the constraint is that the leader should have a special bonus. What do you think that means? Because to me, the leader having a bonus seems like a runaway mechanic. Do you think that means the leader should have a special, like a difficulty modifier? A handicap it's probably a better word than handicap, but that's what comes to mind. Like something that makes it more difficult for them.
Yeah, that does seem like a really poor idea, like a bad idea to give the
Doesn't
leader
feel
a
like
bonus.
a constraint. But maybe we can design something that matches that anyway. Okay.
Or it could be something that's really like a King of the Hill thing. Maybe that's sort of what it means, where
Sure. Like
the leader
Mario
gets
Party
a target put on their back.
3 versus 1. Yeah, where
So it's important to like go after it, forces you to go after the leader, which is an example of a type of game I really don't like. So this is very challenging for me. Like with Auction Video, I don't really like that, and this beat up on the leader mechanic, I don't like that either. But anyway, and play a specific number of cards. That could go one of two ways. It could be just your goal is to get 3 cards played into 3 slots, and it's like a race. When you have gotten 3 of those cards played in, you win.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be like secret, you need to play this many cards to win. I need to play that many cards to win.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's hard for me to picture that being I think the only way something like that could work and not just be unfair, where it's like I have to play 4 and you have to play 3, and it's not just automatically easier for you to win because of that, would be if there's also something that forces you to play cards, whether you want to or not, or something like that.
So I'm starting to unpack an idea here. Do you want to build something with me, or do you want to do your own thing and come up with 2 ideas?
Let's do it together, because I am not somebody who likes to I like to help develop games. I don't
Please develop my game, because I have
never interested in making something brand new. I'm like, there's enough to do. I don't have that problem that a lot of game designers have.
I have just a skeleton here, and I'm trying my best to really meet all of these criteria. So I'm trying to think about what they mean. So I'm picturing a game about nuclear energy. I'm going to try and not make Power Grid here, and it's a card game to satisfy the victory condition there. So my idea is you're starting with cards in your hand that represent power generated, and you're trying to play 10 powers. You're trying to generate enough power to meet the win condition. So once you've generated, we'll say 10 cards played, 10 power laid down in front of you, then you win the game. The bidding is going to be, I was thinking about, there's like a around the table bid on producing power each turn, and the player
like being allowed to produce power at all, like getting to play this round, you mean? Or
maybe that's a better idea. I was thinking about being allowed to produce power, but the person that wins the bid creates power. They lay it down, but they also generate nuclear waste. And there's some kind of inverse condition where if you generate too much waste, you lose. And so I told you it's just a skeleton. So you're trying to play a lot of cards and win the bid while also producing as little waste as possible. But it's an inverse bid where players will say, obviously, you could say, I want to play 10 cards and produce the waste, and then you just win. And someone else says, well, I'll do it for 9. And you work your way down until someone's like, I will take the hit of producing the waste, and I only will get 2 power out of it. So it's to the lowest bidder, essentially. Does that make sense? The person that's willing to take the negative for as little power as possible. And so it goes to the lowest bidder. And no one else gets to lay any cards down. Just the winner of the bid gets to lay the cards down, play the power, and then take the negative. If you create I don't know, 3 nuclear waste. If you lose 3 bids, essentially, then you lose the game, and the person in the lead gets some kind of government regulation against them. So they're the big powerhouse, no pun intended, and so they're under stricter regulation, um, and I don't know, maybe they have to um, be held to a higher standard of energy efficiency, or they have to pay some extra tax rules, and so they are allowed less waste. This is absolutely a skeleton of a game, but it's a game about being the lowest bidder. How much risk are you willing to take to try and dump your hand? That's the structure I have. Help me develop this, because it's
That's not that's not a bonus. Being in the lead, that's a handicap that you've given.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
I think you'd be allowed to, like, if you're in the lead, you get to put down an extra card if you win the bid.
Because being in the lead is costly, because you had to take the negative for winning the bid. So it's okay to give someone a bonus, and that makes them want to win bids sooner, because if you maintain King of the Hill, you can chain that. So that's going to make people aggressively try and win the bids more, even though winning the bid hurts you. I like that. That might put someone in a position where they'll, only play down 1 card to be the lowest bidder, because there's some kind of bonus for being in the lead. Maybe being in the lead means that you, I don't know, that you can bribe your way through the government officials, and you can ignore an inspection this round. Or maybe it just means gains of efficiency with scale, where bigger utility companies are able to often produce energy with a lower overhead because of their
right. It seems like the bonus would be like a card that says, efficient energy, or something like efficient energy production.
Yeah. There's a term for that in my industry. I'm trying to think of it, where you are like the primary producer in a region, like the number 1 producer of electricity in the state of Georgia. There's a term for that. And so you could be that person by being in the lead, and you would get a bonus for it, like making energy more efficiently. Or maybe it could be a random bonus. Maybe it could be your choice of a bonus. Maybe you've got better PR. Maybe you've got prices on lower fuel, things like that.
So the way you've described it right now, unless I'm missing something, it sounds like the way the game would actually end up working is people will lose before they win.
It will put people, this might not be good, you might need to change this, but the way it would work is it would put you in a spot where you cannot bid under a certain amount without losing. Yeah, so like you might take a really low bid early on and get the lead, but have 2 nuclear waste, and you still have 6 cards left to get rid of, and so you can't outbid people forever, because if you keep taking that waste, then you'll lose. Yeah, it makes you decide when to take that loss and that little bit, and when not to. It needs something else, though.
What if you don't know how many cards somebody's going to get to play, because it's based on another card that they have, like a multiplier that they have?
Yeah.
Oh, what if you had a set of like 4 or 5 multiplier tiles, and you got to pick like which one to activate? You're using it up forever by activating it this time. So you're doing a little bit of thinking of what do you think everybody else played?
I definitely think you need some hidden information, whether it's blind bidding or secret powers that let you do different things. And that'll add some risk and uncertainty, because I think the problem with my initial skeleton is perfect information makes the game a little bit too predictable. It puts people in spots where everyone else knows what they can and can't do, and you lose your ability to make meaningful choices. So randomness is good, as long as it's a little bit. In this case, this is player created randomness, where the randomness is other people's decisions and your inability to predict those because of the uncertain information, not dice rolling randomness.
So I feel like this is like very simple prototype to put together. I'm kind of just curious to play it and see what actually would happen. It's very hard for me to, I think I would have a lot more to say about it after playtesting a very skeleton version of it. But yeah, it's just cards. It's kind of an interesting concept, you know.
I love this phase of prototyping where you get an idea that's far, and I always try and start my ideas small so I can do what you just said, and I can print it out and sit down and play it, and then I'll usually take it to my wife or to a co-designer, or my wife who is a co-designer, or or a friend or family member, and I'll say, listen, this is hot garbage, but there might be something good in here. Let's give me 10 minutes of your time, and let's see what part, if any of this is interesting, and then I try and grow from that portion of it, because I can't tell what part of this works and what part of this sucks until, like you said, we've sat down and played it. But it'll be really easy to test.
One thing that I would suggest making part of the theme to, like you said, recent events and stuff, is what went wrong in Texas when everybody was freezing when there was a blizzard. You know what I mean? Especially because you work in the power industry, so you probably understand that much better than the average person does.
Because that was literally a market problem. It was a market problem that, I mean, it was a lot. I don't mean to simplify a really tragic event, but a big part of what broke, from my understanding in the industry of that event, was that the way that the market, unique to Texas, because Texas is a most power grids will share power between states in the US, but Texas is an island power wise. They don't take power in and out of their state from neighboring states. Their grid is isolated, which has upsides and downsides. But the big downside to it is they can't be affected by market forces external to theirs. And
isn't that the upside? The downside is they can't have help when they're in crisis, I would say, right?
So it is the upside and the downside. You're right. It's why they did it. It's why they did it in part. But in the crisis, the downside was the market couldn't incentivize help to come in, or they literally couldn't turn something and bring help in. They were dependent on creating their own energy, and some of the plants failed due to the cold and couldn't produce enough energy. Basically, it's a market-driven system, which often works very, very well. Most utilities are market-driven system, but it had a failure point in it that when it broke in a really spectacular way, and a lot of people got hurt and are still hurting because of it. So yeah, tying it into that event would be very interesting.
It seems, I can't remember if I've actually heard this or I'm just assuming this, and this makes sense to me that it must be true, but like the further away from a place you're trying to take care of, trying to get power to, the less power is going to actually end up there. Like you're losing some of it along the way, but you also want to make your system as efficient as possible at transferring, lose as little as possible, but it's not possible to make it so no power is lost.
Correct.
Putting something in the grid from Colorado to Montana or something like that.
It's pretty negligible at the grand scale of things. The distribution systems that are built across the US transfer electricity at extremely high voltage, which means you can do it at low amperage. We're getting into electrical engineering, but they've built it where you can send it really long ways and you don't lose much. Just like you can send water a long way and the pressure is consistent through the pipe as long as the pipe doesn't have a leak in it. The power lines work a similar way. There is definitely loss, you're right, but it's not loss where it makes it like really expensive to send electricity from the East Coast to the West Coast.
That's
but
fascinating.
But people own those different sections, and so you might have to pay for the right to send power across it. And there's all of these agreements between states and companies, and then a lot of those agreements roll up to the government so that the government can regulate electricity in the event of an emergency. And so yeah, there's a lot at play there. And then you've got anomalies like Texas, which are excluded from that to both their benefit and their detriment, depending on the situation. But the short answer is we have protection in our country if someone was to try and blow up the power source of a region or an area, we can bring in help pretty easily from other places across the state or across the country. It'd be
Unless
hard.
you're in Texas.
Yeah, unless you're in,
right. So
yeah,
anyway, sheesh.
unless you're in Texas. Yeah. Again, my
Although,
heart goes out to those people. That's a terrible, terrifying thing they live through
yeah.
for a couple weeks, and then the financial fallback on those same
Mhm.
people for months and years later is awful.
And it's a bigger state, right? So there are more power plants in it in the first place, though, too.
Yeah,
It's part of
it is
what's going on
safely
here.
designed, except for the issue that happened with their like internal market and then the extreme weather event. But that's why you hear about it, right? Catastrophes are just that. There's something that shouldn't breaking.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
New Orleans was never supposed to get flooded. It wasn't designed to be flooded, but when it was, we realized there were problems in the way it was built and in
Mhm.
other issues tied to that caused something terrible or allowed something terrible to happen. The problems we would have probably never known about if the catastrophe hadn't happened. I'm talking way outside of my area of expertise here. But,
What's funny is you're on your break from work right now, and we're actually going a little over because we got you talking about your
talking about work.
You could just pretend you're doing your work by educating.
Oh yeah, I'm consulting
other people about
and educating people on utilities and power.
Well, because we're over. I don't know. You probably have to get back to work. We probably don't have time to do the question. Is that correct? What do you think?
I could go if there was someone still in the chat that wanted to talk. I think Zell had to go already.
Right. I see that we have viewers. So if they want to pick a question, even one viewer. Okay. One is me. But I see another one too, depending on where I'm looking. So if somebody is
you're out there in
listening,
Twitch world and you wanna ask us a question, then say hello and we'll give you a couple choices.
But you have to answer now and like tell us that you're real, because that number might also be like an artifact. I never know how much
you
I
have
can
to let us know you're out there,
it.
and then we'll throw you some choices. And in the meantime, what do we have coming up next week, Heather?
Next week is 4-player games. I think it'll be just you and me again next week, and we'll talk next week about what happens after that. We probably are going to take a hiatus in the summer and
break,
revamp, and maybe come back in a different way afterwards. So
if you have thoughts on that, if you're watching this on YouTube or rewatching the video and you have some ideas of what you want this to be or what you've liked about the format so far, things you'd want to see changed, you can let us know in the comments, or if you know me or Heather in Discord or anywhere else, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
Or you could talk to us in probably suggestions. If you're part of our Protospiel Online Discord, suggestions would probably be the best place to talk about it with us. And maybe we can do a Twitch stream that is about talking about this with viewers. Maybe I have to make sure it's at a time when viewers will come and be able to talk to us, or it'll be kind of pointless
reach
to put
out
on
to
the
them in advance and let them know so that we'd have that engagement. But that sounds good.
And I mean, this question we want you to ask us is like the one thing we figured out how to use in Twitch's actual native workings. There's still a lot to learn about Twitch and what makes it fun to watch specifically on Twitch. So that's the type of thing we'll be trying to figure out and come back and do better. That's for myself. That's what I want. That's one of the major things I think isn't figured out in a way that makes it worth doing it on Twitch, basically.
Being transparent, I don't consume a lot of content on Twitch. I consume a lot of Twitch content, but I consume it secondhand. I listen to a lot of podcasts that are streamed on Twitch first and have a lot of community interactivity. I watch a lot of YouTube that is captured from Twitch and then reshared by that same creator. But I don't listen to a lot of stuff. I don't consume a lot of live media anywhere on Facebook or Instagram, on TV. I consume media after the fact. So I don't interact a lot with people in the live seat like we are. So I'm like you. I think I'm still trying to figure out how to make that more appealing and interesting to the people that do like to be a part of that. Because I know there's a big audience for it. I've had friends that are successful streamers on Twitch. You just, I guess you have to find that right match. So interested to think and talk more about that with you later.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
All right.
Oh, well, and we haven't heard from you if you're still with us, whoever you were or are. So that's okay. We'll just leave it for next week, and we'll see if I don't think I want to use next week to talk about it. I think let's go ahead and talk about 4-player like is on the schedule.
Like the schedule says.
But we can schedule like a completely standalone, maybe sometime in July, time to talk about what we'll evolve into or how we'll move forward with. I know I want to continue doing table talk. I think that we're all, you and I and Jay are all agreed that it's an interesting kind of conversation to have, but whether or not we have it on Twitch is probably the question, or how we have it on Twitch if we do have it on Twitch. So we'll see what happens. All evolving.
All right. I like that. That sounds good. Thanks for your time, Heather. Thanks to all of you watching now and in the future.
Thanks, viewers. Yes.
Have
we'll
a
see you
good
next
day.
time. Bye.